Our story begins in 1928, when a collection of players from defunct independent, semi-professional, and professional football teams formed together to create the Portsmouth Ohio Spartans. In 1929, the team was granted funding to build a new stadium capable of hosting professional games, and in July of 1930, the National Football League would grant Portsmouth, Ohio, and their shiny new stadium a franchise. Portsmouth would become the NFL's second smallest host city, only ahead of Green Bay. In the Spartans' inaugural season, the team went 5-6-3, finishing 7th place out of 11 teams in the NFL. But by 1932, the Spartans were tied for first place in the NFL, including an impressive win over the defending NFL champion Green Bay Packers. The Spartans won 19-0 in what was dubbed the Iron Man game, as the head coach Potsy Clark didn't make a single substitution all game. All of this culminated to what would be deemed the first playoff game in NFL history, as the Spartans faced off against the Chicago Bears, both of which were tied for first place in the league. The Bears would ultimately win that game 9-0. However, despite the early success from the product on the field, the Spartans as a franchise was in trouble financially. The team was unable to pay its players, and the small market was not able to keep the team afloat. Enter George A. Richards, the owner of the Detroit radio station WJR, who in 1934 purchased the Portsmouth Spartans for $8,000 and moved the team to Detroit. George A. Richards would name the team the Detroit Lions. Richards had a dream: to build a team that reflected the Lions as the king of the jungle, as he believed his football team was good enough to be the king of the NFL. But like all dreams, they can only last so long, and eventually, you have to wake up. The inaugural season of the Detroit Lions could not have started any better. The 1934 season began with a 10-game win streak. However, the team would go on to lose their last 3 games and therefore finish in second place in the division. 2 of those 3 losses coming to the Green Bay Packers and Chicago Bears, rivals from the very beginning. Owner George Richards would also use his media connections to negotiate a deal with NBC to broadcast his Lions on Thanksgiving Day, which would help solidify the tradition of the Lions on Thanksgiving. To learn more about that, you can check out my deep dive special on the subject. Anyways, along with a national audience and immediate success, the Lions continued to burst onto the scene in their second season, winning the division and winning the NFL championship 26-7 against the New York Giants. The following seasons, the team would finish with records of 8-4, 7-4, and 7-4 again, but never finished better than second place in the division, finding themselves behind either the Packers or Bears. Following 1938, Lions greats quarterback Dutch Clark and running back Ernie Cadell both retired and left a massive void of talent to fill. As a result, the team entered a decade of uncertainty and an inevitable drop-off. The team saw a win-loss records ranging from 7-3 all the way to the dreaded 0-11. In fact, that 0-11 team was so bad that it never scored more than 7 points in a game all season, and were shut out 5 times. The struggling Lions also featured the, so far, last instance of a scoreless tie in NFL history. But the decade was also home to reasons for hope, as the team rebuilt their roster and made moves for young stars. In fact, many considered the roster to be mostly championship ready, with the only thing missing being a franchise quarterback. In 1950, that would all change and bring on a decade of unseen prosperity. The Lions would trade, get this, a fullback, Camp Wilson, for quarterback Bobby Lane of the New York Yanks. Oh, how the times have changed. A fullback for a quarterback. That would be absurd in today's NFL. Either way, as funny as that trade sounds, from today's standards, it turned out to be the missing piece for the Detroit Lions, who improved to 7-4-1 in Lane's first season under center, followed by a 9-3 record in 1952, which led the team to the playoffs for the first time in 17 years. They would defeat the Los Angeles Rams in the National Conference Championship, and move on to face Paul Brown's Cleveland Browns for the first of 4 championship meetings between the two teams throughout the decade. The Detroit Lions would take home the first matchup 17-7. They followed that up with an absolutely dominant 1953 season from start to finish. It began with a team selecting future Hall of Fame linebacker Joe Schmidt in the 7th round of the draft, and then going 10-2 in the season, sweeping the Bears and the Packers in 4 consecutive weeks. That squad would finish with 7 Pro Bowlers and 8 All-Pros. and to put the cherry on top, won the championship 17-16 over the Cleveland Browns. In 1954, the Lions would go 9-2-1 and meet the Browns for the third year in a row in the championship game. However, this time Paul Brown would get his revenge with a 56-10 stomping. The stunned Lions would stumble to a 3-win season in 1955, but bounced back to 9-3 in 1956 and a first-place finish at 8-4 in 1957. The Lions were back in the playoffs after a 2-year gap and would face off against the San Francisco 49ers. But by halftime, the home team 49ers had taken a 24-7 lead over the Lions. Was this Lions team actually a fluke? Did they not deserve to return to the playoffs? I mean, after all, their starting quarterback, Bobby Lane, was out with injury, and the team was relying on backup Tobin Rote. Well, the thin walls at halftime provided all the motivation they needed. Through the wall, they could hear a celebrating 49ers team that believed they had already won the game based on the score. The teams would come out in halftime and the 49ers would score a field goal on the opening drive. However, that would be the last points they scored for the remainder of the game. The Lions' backup quarterback led the team to a 24 unanswered point comeback to win 31-27 and send the Lions to the championship game. The team they would face would be, of course, the Cleveland Browns, the team that had shell-shocked them just 2 years prior. But backup quarterback Tobin Rote and the Lions were fed up and returned to the favor with a 59-14 domination over the Browns. It would be their third championship in 6 years, and 4 in their first 28 years of existence. The Lions and their fanbase were at the pinnacle of their success, a feeling of redemption and pure bliss. However, as I mentioned at the beginning of this journey, all dreams do come to an end, and this, my friends, was the end. In 1958, the Detroit Lions would trade their sensational quarterback Bobby Lane to the Pittsburgh Steelers in exchange for quarterback Earl Morrall and 2 draft picks. Following the great success with Lane throughout the 1950s, it was understandable that it would come as a shock to Lane that he would be traded. And according to NFL legend, as Lane left town, he vowed that the Lions would not win another championship for another 50 years. And thus, the curse of Bobby Lane was born, and the Lions have never returned to the NFL championship ever since. The immediate next 2 seasons saw the team finish 4-7-1 and 3-8-1. A quick rebuild on the defense centered around stars from the 1950s, Joe Schmidt, Yale Larry, Dick LeBeau, and the addition of Hall of Famer Dick Night Train Lane, saw the team make a short turnaround, going 7-5 in 1960, and winning over their old friends, the Cleveland Browns, for 3rd place in the NFL in what was deemed the Playoff Bowl. This would be the last time the Lions and the Browns would ever face off against each other in the playoffs. In 1962, the defense was at full strength and crushed opponents to an 11-3 campaign, including a Thanksgiving Day game against the Packers dubbed the Thanksgiving Day Massacre, in which the Packers took their only L for the season and the quarterback was sacked 11 times in one game. Again, to learn more about that, check out my Thanksgiving deep dive video. So the Lions would play for 3rd place in the NFL for the 3rd year in a row at the Playoff Bowl. However, after that, the team would revert back to a 5-8-1 season in 1963, and the team would not reach the playoffs again for the remainder of the decade. That same year, William Clay Ford Sr. would buy a majority interest in the Detroit Lions for $4.5 million, and the stars in the defense began to retire. This would begin to set up a decade of mediocrity for new owner William Ford, who tried desperately to hold on to his team's prior success, but instead had the team tread water in the dangerous zone between good and bad. 1970 saw the Lions' last playoff appearance for the next 12 years. Despite a bright beacon amongst down seasons, the 1970 team saw its fair share of dark moments. Football-wise, the Lions would be on the losing end of the longest field goal in NFL history at the time, a 63-yard boot from Saints kicker Tom Dempsey on the final play of regulation. But real tragedy would strike on October 24th, 1971, when receiver Chuck Hughes collapsed and died of a heart attack on the field during the game, and is the only NFL player to ever die on the field of play. It would be the darkest moment in Lions football history, and cast a shadow over the Lions' lone playoff season that decade. Moving forward, despite never having terrible seasons, averaging about 7 wins during that time, they were simply just never good enough for another playoff opportunity. But also they were never bad enough to draft good players. Their worst season during this time coming in 1979 when the team finished 2-14. But this did enable the Lions to draft running back Billy Sims with the first overall selection in the 1980 draft, along with starting quarterback Eric Hipple. But again, the fruits of those draft picks never quite ripened to sustainable success. The team would reach the playoffs in 1982, but only because their 4-5 record during a strike-shortened season was good enough to let them qualify. In 1983, the team returned to the playoffs but lost to the 49ers. The team would then bottom out with an average of 5 wins per season over the next 5 years. William Ford would fire disappointing head coach Darryl Rogers and replace him with interim head coach Wayne Fontes. Fontes would go on to become one of the best coaches in Lions history, owning the franchise record for wins, but also owning the franchise record for losses. The Fontes era would begin with the selection of an NFL icon, an unarguable face of the franchise in 1989. With the 3rd overall pick, the Detroit Lions select running back Barry Sanders. In 1989, the Lions finished with a 7-9 record, placing 3rd in their division. However, it became clear the team had a superstar to build around going forward. The team had a vision of hope, and Barry Sanders was that vision. In his rookie year, Sanders came just 10 yards short of being the NFL rushing leader, finishing with 1,470 yards. So in 1990, Sanders rushed for 1,304 yards and won the NFL rushing crown. For his efforts, the Lions as a whole regressed to 6-10. But finally, in Sanders' 3rd year, the Lions finished 12-4 for the first place in the division and advanced to the divisional round of the playoffs against the Dallas Cowboys. The Lions pummeled the Cowboys 38-6 for their first playoff win since 1957. However, the high of the 1991 season would come to a quick end the very next week as the Washington Redskins whooped the Lions 41-10 in the NFC Championship game. But I'm sure, despite the terrible loss, the players believed they would return the very next season and claim the championship they desired. Well, of course they didn't. They would regress to 5-11 for last place in the division. Luckily, that was an anomaly, as the team would win the division the very next year. However, they would suffer a loss in the wild card round to the Green Bay Packers. The next season, in 1994, the team clinched a playoff berth for the 3rd time in 4 years, only to lose to the Packers again in the wild card round. Still riding the back of Barry Sanders, the Lions would yet again play in the wildcard round after a 10-6 season in 1995, only for the Eagles to absolutely embarrass the Lions with a 58-37 loss. The team would again regress to 5-11 the next year, and by this point, Barry Sanders had seen enough losing, and physically carried the team to a 9-7 record and playoff berth off of his incredible 2,053-yard rushing performance. Barry Sanders would become just the 3rd running back in NFL history to reach the 2,000-yard rushing mark. But despite his Herculean effort, the Lions would suffer another one-and-done appearance in the playoffs, a hallmark of the Sanders era. In 1998, the Lions would regress again to 5-11. That offseason, Barry Sanders would shock the NFL landscape and announce his retirement at age 30, after 10 highly productive years in the NFL, still at the top of his game. But who could blame him? Despite constantly leading the NFL in rushing yards with less than ideal talent around him and earning several Offensive Player of the Year awards and an NFL MVP, the Lions never seemed to be able to capitalize on his greatness. The Lions had failed to seize the moment, and thus their brightest star had vanished, and hopeless darkness would return. The decade following Barry Sanders' shocking departure would feature the lowest points of the Lions franchise in terms of team success. Although surprisingly in 1999, the Lions would finish 8-8 and make a brief appearance in the playoffs, but of course they would lose in the wildcard round to the Washington Redskins. But at the start of a new millennia, things began to take a turn. Just 9 games into the 2000 season, head coach Bobby Ross would resign following a bad loss to the Miami Dolphins. Ross would resign out of perceived frustration, as according to him, the team refused to work hard. Yet, new head coach Gary Mueller would lead that same Lions team to the doorstep of the playoffs, just needing to defeat the Chicago Bears in the regular season finale. But a 54-yard field goal with just seconds left on the clock sealed the Lions' fate, ending their season at 9-7. Following that surprisingly successful season, the Lions team president and CEO Matt Millen would replace Gary Mueller, who had just narrowly missed the playoffs, with a new head coach, Marty Mornhinweg. The Lions would go 2-14 in 2001, and in 2002 the Lions finished 3-13 and Marty Mornhinweg was fired. Steve Mariucci was hired by Matt Millen to be the next head coach. The team would go 5-11 and follow that up with a 6-10 campaign in 2004. Seeing the absolutely incredible success the Lions have had the last 4 seasons under Matt Millen, the Lions would sign him to a 5-year contract extension to continue leading the team. And during that 2005 season, Millen would fire his 3rd head coach, Steve Mariucci, and the Lions would finish 5-11. Millen would hire Rod Marinelli in 2006 to be the new head coach. The team would go 3-13. This did earn them the 2nd overall pick in the 2007 draft, which they were able to use on some receiver out of Georgia Tech named Calvin Johnson. We'll talk more about him in just a second, because before we can talk about that, we have to finally talk about the 2008 season. The Detroit Lions would become the first team in the 16-game era of the NFL history to never win a single game. This means the Lions now held the NFL record for consecutive losses in a season at 16. The only other team to join them in this 0-16 club being the 2017 Cleveland Browns. Although the one bright spot to come out of the 2008 season is that Matt Millen was finally let go as team president and CEO after leading the Lions to a dreadful 31 wins and 84 losses in his 7 seasons leading the team. Rod Marinelli would also be fired as head coach, leading to yet another clean slate across the board and a chance to rebuild. And armed with the 1st overall pick in the 2009 NFL Draft, the Lions franchise looked to do just that. With that number 1 overall selection, the Lions would take quarterback Matthew Stafford, who would go on to be the Lions' all-time leader in passing yards and touchdowns. Stafford would pair with the before-mentioned mammoth athlete of a receiver and Hall of Famer Calvin Johnson to provide a new era of hope to the Lions. Unfortunately, much would remain the same for the Lions franchise. They started with a 2-14 season in Stafford's rookie year, and after a 6-10 finish in 2010, the Lions finally pieced together something in the 2011 season on the back of Stafford's 5,038 passing yards and Calvin Johnson's 1,681 receiving yards and 16 touchdowns. The team entered week 17 at 10-5, with a playoff spot already clinched. They were playing the Packers with playoff seeding on the line, and the Lions would allow the Packers' backup quarterback to throw 6 touchdown passes to win the game 45-41. Thus, now at 10-6, the Lions would go on to the wildcard round to face the New Orleans Saints. The Lions would lose 45-28, more crushing one-and-done losses for the Lions. Falling to 4-12 and 7-9 the following 2 seasons, the Lions' longtime owner, William Clay Ford Sr., died at the age of 88, after 51 years of owning the franchise. In his half-century reign, he got to see his Lions win just one singular playoff game. His wife, Martha Ford, would take over the team. In 2014, her first year as owner, the team would earn their most wins in a season since 1991. They would go 11-5 thanks to having the league's 2nd best defense. This was the best the Lions had felt in decades. They looked to truly be players in the playoffs for the first time in seemingly forever. But fate had other plans, or possibly the curse of Bobby Lane still looming over the team, as the Lions would suffer a controversial loss to the Dallas Cowboys in the wildcard round following a pass interference penalty against the Cowboys that was initially called but then reversed. The Lions once again exited the playoffs without a victory. the team would continue to hover around mediocrity from 2015 to 2017, earning just one playoff spot during that time, which, as you may have guessed by now, resulted in a wildcard loss. And following 3 terrible seasons under new head coach Matt Patricia, the team was in need of a reset. Calvin Johnson had retired, and longtime franchise quarterback Matthew Stafford would be traded to the Los Angeles Rams. It was time to rebuild once again. Owner Martha Ford would step down from her role and transfer her position to her daughter, Sheila Ford Hamp. She would hire Brad Holmes as general manager and Dan Campbell as head coach to lead this new rebuild. Dan Campbell brought an intense energy to a fairly hopeless franchise, known as a player's coach who wasn't afraid to show his passion for the guys in his locker room. Dan Campbell immediately made an impact in his introductory press conference by proclaiming that he wanted his Lions team to, quote, kick you in the teeth, and when you punch us back, we're gonna smile at you, and when you knock us down, we're gonna get up, and on the way up, we're gonna bite off your kneecap. It's gonna take 2 more shots to knock us down, and on the way up again, we're gonna bite off your other kneecap. End quote. Are you not entertained? Of course, this was a welcome energy to the Lions fan base, who had now a desire to win, and a glimmer of hope for a better future was beginning to shine. And the Lions would take offensive tackle Penei Sewell at number 7 overall in the 2021 NFL Draft, and then following a complete teardown of talent and a 3-13-1 finish in 2021, the Lions drafted hometown star pass rusher Aidan Hutchinson with the 2nd overall pick in 2022. With hopefully 2 studs in the trenches, the Lions were set up to follow in the dog mentality of their leader, Dan Campbell. Will they finally be able to capitalize and shake the curse that has clouded their franchise for over 50 years? Well, the Lions fan base can certainly dream. Thank you all so much for watching the complete history of the Detroit Lions. There are so many little details within each season that it would be impossible to cover everything, but I hope I did it some justice. If you did enjoy, I would appreciate it if you left a like on this video. And if you want more content like this, then please subscribe to show your support and join our growing community. Lastly, if you've made it this far into the video, you're a real one. This has been a long one, and thanks for sticking with me. Comment kneecaps below so I know who you guys and gals are who made it this far into the video. Alright, thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.